We're often being told that small is not enough. Well, today, I'm actually going to disagree with that. For me, when it comes to engagement about the climate crisis, I quite like seeing it as starting a business. You know, when you look at those very successful businesses, they didn't go from idea to success overnight. What they did, what they all have in common, is that they got started. They took the first step. They reached out to their first customers. They asked for feedback. They did something and they kept improving and improving. So for me, this is really about that journey, about finding out what is that aha moment that makes sense to me and gets me like away, thinking away from my mind and getting it closer to my heart. The second one is about starting, taking that first step, whatever that is. And from there, this is where we start building that momentum. And from momentum, this is where we've got the collective power that really comes to life. So I don't think there is any blueprint that we can all follow, but what I really believe is that to get started, we really need to follow our passion. So what we'll do today is actually telling you my little story of how I came across the circular economy. It actually all started in Uganda a couple of years ago when I went to run a marathon. And there, what happened is that I really discovered a brand new meaning of sustainability. What it really meant, you know, being sustainable, being able to carry on doing what we are doing for a long time with the people, the planet, and for prosperity all at the same time. And what happened there is that one day we helped in a local community project and we had to build a little wooden hut that was becoming a plastic collection point. And whilst some of my friends were doing that, I went down the streets giving out leaflets to the locals, explaining them that if they were collecting the rubbish plastic from the floor and bringing it to that hut, we will give them some money in exchange, and that plastic will then be used for something else and being recycled. Now, what was fascinating, this is actually the children that really made the first move. And I saw that they were all just looking at me, nodding their head, thinking like, yeah, fine. But what happened is that actually they all went home and came back running with massive bags. And within a couple of hours, they literally cleared out the street from plastic. And that for me was that massive haha moment. From that point onward, it was like, it was a point of no return. I really had to change things in my life, in the way that I was consuming things, but also in my business practices. Now, I'm very conscious that not everyone can go to Uganda, will go to Uganda to have the aha moment, and it doesn't have to be. Ultimately, this is really about finding something that connects to your heart. And for me, at that very specific time, it was business. Out of the 3 pillars of sustainability, it was business. Because I've got a commercial background, I wasn't raised by co-warrior parents, but business made sense. I always liked looking at things from new angles when there were challenges, trying to find plan B and going around things. And something that really fascinated me was actually seeing that light bulb moment in people's eyes when I came across like crazy ideas that actually could really help solving some of those business challenges. So this really at the time what I was passionate about. Fast forward a few months later and going back to my Uganda story, one of my colleagues mentioned in a meeting something called the circular economy. And at that time I had absolutely no clue what that was. But he said enough to tease my interest. And from that point, I started researching a little bit more. And that was that light bulb moment in my own eyes. I realized how much business sense it actually made. So just to tell you a little bit more about the circular economy, what is that? Because you're probably quite curious about it. So when we look at the circular economy, we can basically start by picturing a line. And in that line, this is really thinking about the industrial world we're living in, where we dig something out of the ground, we make something out of it, we consume it, and once we're done, we're throwing it away. And it very often ends up in our landfill. In a circular economy, you still picture that line, but you bend it over into a circle. And what happened there is that the products and the materials start going around in circles within that loop. So in a circular economy, resources are never used up. They are being used again and again. And this is also a system that works with and within the living world. So this is a regenerative approach in that aspect. And in the circular economy, there are three key principles. The first one is designing out waste and pollution. The second one is keeping products and resources in use as much as we can. And the third one is using regenerative practices. And this was another point where I was like, it makes so much business sense. If it does make so much business sense, why is it not more present in my life? And how could I really bring that back home? And that's a phase where I started having a very big questioning phase, you know. So if the circular economy is about designing out waste, I saw that starting looking at my life from a wasteful perspective made sense. So I started looking, where am I wasteful? Is there anything that I could reuse more? Could I reuse some of my belongings? Could I repair some of my belongings instead of throwing it away when they were not in use anymore? Could I start sharing more? And by that, it was asking people when I needed something, but also offering when I had surplus of something in my house. Could I start renting more some of my things rather than owning them? And then when I had to buy them, could I buy them from recycled material, for example? And then there is another principle within the circular economy that says that waste equals food. So if waste equals food, could I find any ways to restore some of those living cycles in my house? So that was a fascinating time, but really a challenging one as well. I really felt like at the bottom of a massive staircase, feeling like I need to take that first step. I don't know where and how to do that. And this is for me where the small steps are really, really important. Find something that will drive you to actually put that foot on the first step so that this is not too difficult, so that you can start building the momentum and want to make the next one. And in my life, what I started doing is actually renting out some of my jeans, some of my clothes. I've started drinking beers that were made out of bread waste from the supermarket. When I couldn't rent some other clothes, I've started using brands that were taking back my old clothes to reuse them into their manufacturing system. I started also buying sunglasses and bags that were made out of plastic from the sea. And the glasses are actually made from fish nets that are being recovered from the sea. And I also started looking at the main brands I'm using and using Loop, which enables a system that enables us, consumer, to get the mainstream brands through reusable packaging through some of our big supermarkets. So this is from a consumption point of view. And then I started looking at my house from a regenerative aspect and started looking at composting more. And with that compost, growing some more vegetables that I could eat again in my life. And then I realized how much water I actually needed to grow those vegetables. And I also realized how much water I was wasting every single day in my shower. So since then, I actually have a bucket. My son's push, but I do have a bucket in my shower. And you know that running water at the beginning where it's not hot enough for you to jump under, where I do collect that water and then use it for my garden to grow my vegetable. So this is my way to actually start restoring some of those natural loops and make it happen. And then one day, because I decided I needed to go even further, I actually do have a big box of things that I need to repair that keep piling up onto it. And over the summer, I decided I needed to make something of it. And I took a little hand hoover that I needed to repair. I opened it and I miserably failed, purely because it wasn't designed to be repaired. But that did two things. One, it made me realize that when I buy the next thing, whatever that is, to look for items, products that can be repaired. And the second one is something that I certainly hadn't anticipated, is that my daughter, by looking at me trying to repair this one, became really curious and inspired. And since then, the toolbox that we've got in the house became her toolbox, as she said. And she keeps opening up and looking at things works and trying to invent and design new things. And that was something I hadn't expected to happen. Now, that was my way to try to bring the circular economy to my house. There are many, many other ways, and it certainly isn't a blueprint. But really, it is about having that mindset, trying to question things. And I guess curiosity is now becoming my main companion. Whenever I see something in a house, I'm like, ooh, could I do things differently to the way that I'm using them today, or to the way that I consume them? So the curiosity aspect is something that is becoming really prominent. And also the playfulness. I realized it wasn't about having major transformations, but it was about building the small steps. And I do reward myself, and I do tell the people about it. And when I tell other people as well, the great thing is that they give me new ideas and new solutions I hadn't thought about. And it also inspires them to do the same. And that in itself is fascinating. So I will leave you with one final thought. Is, I don't know you, but when I grew up, I was always being told that going round and round in circle was totally pointless. And since I discovered the circular economy, I'm actually like 100% sure now that going around and around in circle is what makes the most sense in our current world. Thank you.